Close your eyes for a second. We are traveling back in time to March 1193. We stand in the center of Damascus. The air is thick with incense and spices, the smell of a medieval city. But underneath it all, there is a heavy, suffocating sense of panic. It is a moment that paralyzed the entire Middle East. The most powerful man in the Islamic world has just died. We are talking about a man who rules an empire like a giant crescent. It stretches from the Nile River in Egypt down to the mountains of Yemen across Syria and deep into the valleys of Mesopotamia. He has done the impossible. He has crushed the Crusader armies. He has retaken Jerusalem. He was, without exaggeration, the emperor of the Middle East. Naturally, the funeral preparations begin. His servants, his closest advisors, and his generals go to open his personal treasure. They need to pay for the procession and the burial cloths. You would expect chests overflowing with gold and rubies, the spoils of a lifetime of war, a fortune that could buy a small country. That is what a sultan's treasury should look like. But they open the heavy doors, look inside the chests, and find dust. Almost literally dust. They find exactly 1 piece of Tyrian gold and 47 pieces of silver. 47 Nasserite dirhams. That was not even enough money to pay for the dust they needed to sprinkle on his grave. It is unbelievable. His friends, the generals who had conquered cities with him, had to borrow money from merchants just to buy the linen to wrap his body for burial. That one image sticks. The man who conquered the holiest city on earth and commanded vast armies died completely penniless. That paradox is exactly where we start. We are talking about Saladin Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to the West simply as Saladin. The name is legendary. For most, Saladin is more of a symbol than a person. He is the chivalrous knight in Western books, or the perfect hero on a statue in an Eastern capital. Our mission is to ignore the statues. If you only look at the myth, you miss the actual genius of the man. Before we dissect the life of this titan, welcome to the History Titans channel. If you want to see more empires rise and fall, make sure to subscribe and share this story with a friend. Now let us look at the reality. We have a massive stack of sources, from his own biographers who adored him, to his critics who definitely did not, and modern military analysis. When you sift through it all, you realize he was not born a hero. Not even close. He sounds like a usurper, a schemer, a Kurdish mercenary, a master of PR, an absolutely ruthless strategist, a man who overthrew caliphs. And yes, a man of at times surprising mercy. But was that mercy genuine or just another military tactic? Why is his symbol, the eagle, still the emblem of half the countries in the Middle East today? Saladin's life is not just a story of swords and shields. It is a masterclass in how you unify a completely broken world. It starts at the beginning with the unlikely rise. He was not born in a palace in Cairo or Damascus. He was born in Tikrit, in modern-day Iraq, around 1137. The first thing you have to understand is his ethnicity. Saladin was Kurdish. That distinction was vital in the 12th century. The power structure of the Middle East was a military aristocracy, but the soldiers, the generals, and the power holders were mostly Turks. The Seljuk Turks and their successor states dominated the landscape. They were the elite cavalry and the ruling dynasties. Being a Kurd meant Saladin was an outsider. He was not part of the established Turkish military club by blood. He was a minority within the ruling class he was trying to climb. He had to work twice as hard to get half the respect. If you look at his early life, you would never bet on him becoming a general, let alone a sultan. The sources describe him as undistinguished. He was not the guy out in the yard practicing sword fighting until his hands bled. He was an intellectual. He loved religious studies and Islamic law. He was apparently more comfortable debating theology or studying poetry than leading a cavalry charge. He was by all accounts a bookworm, a scholar in the making. So how does the Kurdish bookworm from Tikrit end up running the world? Family connections. His father Ayyub was a governor and a capable man, but the real engine of his rise was his uncle Shirkuh, the Lion of the Mountains, a top-tier nickname. Shirkuh was the polar opposite of young Saladin. He was a rough, drinking, fighting, hard-bitten general, serving a very powerful man named Nur al-Din. We need to set the scene because the map is messy. You have Nur al-Din in Syria, the powerful Sunni Muslim ruler. You have the Crusaders, holding a strip of land along the coast, including Jerusalem. And down in Egypt, you have the Fatimid Caliphate. The Fatimids were Shia. In the 12th century, the split between Sunni and Shia was a cold war. Now, the Sunni Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad and the Shia Fatimid Caliph in Cairo completely denied each other's religious legitimacy. They saw each other as heretics. Egypt was the prize. It was rich, but it was crumbling and chaotic. It was a three-way struggle for control between Crusaders, the Fatimids themselves, and Nur al-Din's forces. In 1164, Nur al-Din sends his best general Shirkuh to intervene in Egypt. Shirkuh drags his bookish nephew along for the ride. One source says Saladin actually cried when he was told he had to go. He did not want to leave his comfortable life of study in Damascus, but he goes. The Egyptian gambit begins. Through a series of incredibly complicated battles and political maneuvers, Shirkuh manages to take control of Cairo. Almost immediately after becoming the power behind the throne, Shirkuh dies. Suddenly, he apparently had a massive feast and just died, leaving his nephew the quiet one in charge. The year is 1169. Saladin is appointed vizier of Egypt. The Fatimid Caliph, who was still technically the boss, must be thrilled. He thinks he has hit the jackpot. He thinks, great. This kid is young, he is quiet, he has no power base of his own here. I can control him. That is a classic mistake. The fatal mistake. Underestimating the quiet ones. This is where Saladin completely transforms. The sources say he stops drinking alcohol. He gets deeply serious. He starts building his own power base, putting his family in key positions. In 1171, he pulls off what we call the silent coup. He changed the Friday prayer to a modern ear that sounds like a minor detail. But this was massive. It was a revolution without a single shot being fired. The Friday sermon, the khutbah, is the political and religious pulse of the community. It is the ultimate sign of allegiance. For 200 years, prayers in every mosque in Egypt were said in the name of the Shia Fatimid Caliph in Cairo. Saladin just decided to swap the names. The last Fatimid Caliph, a young man named Al-Adid, was on his deathbed. Saladin saw his window of opportunity. On a Friday in September 1171, he ordered the imams in all the mosques to stop praying for the Fatimid Caliph and start praying for the Sunni Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad. That is so bold. He basically told the entire country, we are changing teams right now. The amazing thing is, the people just accepted it. There were no riots, there was no uprising. When the Fatimid Caliph Al-Adid died just a few days later, some sources suggest he might have been helped along to the afterlife. The timing is certainly convenient. With his death, the Fatimid dynasty, which had ruled for 2 centuries, was just gone. Extinguished. Saladin had single-handedly brought Egypt, the jewel of the Nile, back into the Sunni fold. He was now the absolute master of Egypt. Technically, he was still serving Nur al-Din back in Syria, but let us be honest, he was his own man now. Saladin was the richest, most powerful governor in the entire region. I imagine his boss, Nur al-Din, was not sending him any congratulations. He was terrified. This leads us directly to consolidating power, because we often want to skip straight to the Crusaders. But for the next decade, Saladin is not fighting Christians. He is fighting for his life against other Muslims. It is a civil war within Islam, a cold war that was about to turn very, very hot. Nur al-Din realized Saladin was getting too powerful, too independent. He began gathering a huge army to march on Egypt and remove him from power. Saladin is in a vice. He has the Crusaders on one border and his angry master getting ready to attack from the other. He was in a panic. He was completely trapped. So what did he do? Did he prepare his army to fight Nur al-Din? He considered it, but he also came up with a backup plan. This detail shows you, Saladin was not just a warrior. He was a stone-cold pragmatist. He sent his brother Turan Shah to find them a new kingdom, just in case. He thought, if I lose Egypt, if I get kicked out, where do I go? Where can we retreat to? So in 1174, he sends his brother on an expedition south, named first to Nubia, in what is now Sudan, but there was not much wealth there. So they looked further south, across the Red Sea to Yemen. Why Yemen? The Red Sea trade. All the spices from India, the silks from the east, the incense, they all flowed through the ports of Yemen like Aden. It was a major commercial hub, incredibly rich. Turan Shah went down there and conquered it with brutal efficiency. So while Saladin is stressing out in Cairo waiting for an invasion, his brother is securing the coffee and spice flow in Yemen. It was not just an escape hatch. It became his bank. The vast wealth from the Yemen trade route started flowing back to Cairo. That money funded Saladin's army for years to come. It bought the armor. It paid the mercenaries. Without the conquest of Yemen, there is no Saladin the Great. We always think of the great battles, but it was economics that saved him, and a huge stroke of luck. Just as Nur al-Din was finalizing his plans, just as he was about to march on Egypt, in 1174, he died. An illness. A throat infection maybe, but he was gone. The entire chessboard is reset. Completely. Now there is a massive power vacuum. Nur al-Din left behind a young son, a child. The old emirs are jockeying for position. The Crusader states are watching, waiting for weakness. Saladin decides he has to move. He marches his Egyptian army into Syria. But again he is marching against fellow Muslims, the remnants of his old master's empire. This is where the simple hero narrative gets really complicated. He spent the next 12 years, from 1174 to 1186, not fighting Crusaders, but besieging Muslim cities like Aleppo and Mosul. He justified this how? His argument was always, I have to do this to unify the faith against the Crusaders. I have to conquer you to save you. But the people he was fighting, the Zengids, the old establishment loyal to Nur al-Din's family, they called him a usurper, a traitor. Their propaganda said, you are spilling Muslim blood. You are attacking your brothers in faith, while the Frankish Crusaders sit right there on the coast. Did that criticism bother him? It bothered him deeply. There is a famous quote from his later years. When he was advising one of his sons, he said, beware of bloodshed. Trust not in that. Spilt blood never sleeps. That is heavy. He knew that this violence creates a cycle of vengeance that is hard to break. But he truly genuinely believed that without a unified command, without Egypt and Syria acting as one single fist, they could never ever defeat the Crusader kingdom. And by 1186, he had done it. He took Damascus peacefully. They practically opened the gates for him. He bullied Aleppo and Mosul into submission. And in a classic political move, he married Ismat ad-Din Khatun, the widow of Nur al-Din, sealing the deal, gaining that legitimacy. The ring was now closed. He controlled Egypt. He controlled Syria. He had completely surrounded the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem, which brings us to the moment everyone has been waiting for. The Battle of Hattin 1187. The fuse has been lit for a long time. The final spark was a man named Reynold of Chatillon. Reynold was essentially a movie villain. He was a Crusader lord who controlled the massive castle of Kerak, which was positioned right on the main caravan and pilgrimage route between Damascus and Cairo and Mecca. So prime real estate for causing trouble. He had a very nasty habit of breaking truces. He would swoop down from his castle, attack massive Muslim caravans, steal all the goods, and imprison or kill the pilgrims. He is a land pirate with a fortress. Saladin had warned him repeatedly, but in early 1187, Reynold attacked a huge, rich caravan. The sources say he even taunted the prisoners, telling them, call on your Prophet Muhammad to save you now. That was the final straw. When news of that insult reached Saladin, he swore a sacred oath that he would kill Reynold of Chatillon with his own hand. So he gathers the army, the largest army he had ever assembled. But the battle itself, the Battle of Hattin, was not won by numbers alone. It was won by geography, by heat, and by the sun. It is July 4th, 1187. We are in the Galilee. It is the absolute height of a scorching summer. The geography here is key. The horns of Hattin are these two peaks of an extinct volcano overlooking a plain. Saladin positioned his army to block the Crusaders from the only major water source in the area, the Sea of Galilee. He had the water. They did not. He let the desert do the fighting for him. The Crusader army, led by the King of Jerusalem, Guy of Lusignan, made a fatal, catastrophic error. They marched away from their last sure water source, at some springs in a place called Sepphoris, trying to cross this dry plain to reach the Sea of Galilee at Tiberias. They are marching in full chainmail armor, under a blazing Middle Eastern sun with no water. You cannot even imagine. It is 100 degrees, you're wearing 50 pounds of hot metal, and you are desperately dehydrated. And then, Saladin makes it even worse. He has his light cavalry, and archers set fire to the dry scrub and grass on the plain. That is brilliant, but it is cruel. Now the wind is blowing hot smoke and ash directly into the faces of the Crusader army. They are choking, they are disoriented, they are dying of thirst, and they are completely surrounded. By the time the actual fighting started the next morning, the Crusaders were already broken psychologically and physically. It was not a battle, it was an annihilation. They captured King Guy, a host of other nobles, and they captured Reynold of Chatillon. And perhaps most devastatingly, for the entire Christian world, Saladin's forces captured the true cross, the gilded cross that the Crusaders carried into every major battle, which they believed contained actual pieces of the cross of Christ. For them, its capture meant God had abandoned them. This all leads to the famous tent scene. This is one of those moments in history that is so iconic. It defines Saladin's code of conduct. He has King Guy and Reynold brought to his main tent after the battle. King Guy is slumped over, probably on the verge of heat stroke, absolutely terrified. He's about to be executed. Saladin speaks to him kindly and orders a cup of water chilled with snow brought down from Mount Hermon. The snow is such a power move. I control the land so well I can bring you iced water in the middle of the desert. He hands the golden cup to King Guy. Guy drinks from it deeply, and then without thinking, he hands the cup to Reynold. The whole room must have just gone silent. Saladin interrupts immediately. He says to the interpreter, "Tell the king he gave that man a drink, not I." In Arab custom, the law of hospitality is sacred. If you give a prisoner food, or water bread, and salt, you are guaranteeing his life. You cannot harm a guest who has accepted your hospitality. By saying, "I did not give him the drink," Saladin is saying the king's life is safe with me, but Reynold is not my guest, and he is a dead man walking. Saladin then confronts Reynold, lists his crimes, his broken truces, his blasphemy. He offers him a chance to convert to Islam, which Reynold refuses. Then Saladin draws his scimitar. Some sources say he cut off his arm. Others say he beheaded him right there in the tent. King Guy is trembling, thinking he is next. But Saladin turns to him, gestures for him to sit down, and says, "A king does not kill a king." It is such a calculated dichotomy. Ruthless, swift justice for the man he deemed a war criminal, and absolute chivalry for the honorable enemy, the king. That was Saladin in a nutshell. He played by a strict set of rules, but he enforced them with iron. With the Crusader army completely destroyed at Hattin, the path to Jerusalem was wide open. The cities just started falling like dominoes. Acre, Beirut, Sidon. He swept down the coast. It was a lightning campaign. By October of 1187, just 3 months after Hattin, he was standing outside the walls of Jerusalem. Which brings us to section 4, the fall of Jerusalem, as this has to be the most emotionally charged moment of the entire century. Think about the history here. 88 years earlier, in 1099, the armies of the First Crusade had taken Jerusalem. And when they did, they slaughtered everyone inside. Everyone. Men, women, children. They killed the Muslims in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They burned the Jews alive in their main synagogue. The Christian chroniclers themselves wrote with a kind of horrified glee that their knights waded in blood up to their ankles and their horses' knees. So Saladin is standing outside those same walls, and the entire Muslim world is expecting and probably demanding revenge. Do to them what they did to us. Saladin's initial plan was to do just that, to take the city by the sword, to give no quarter. But the city's defense was organized by a very clever nobleman named Balian of Ibelin. Balian knew he could not win a straight fight, but he had one piece of leverage. He was surrounded by a massive army, yet he sent a message to Saladin. He said, "If you do not give us honorable terms of surrender, we will unleash chaos. We will kill every single Muslim hostage currently in the city. There were thousands of them. Then we will kill our own wives and children, so they do not become your slaves. And then we will destroy the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We will burn them to the ground and leave you nothing but a pile of smoldering stones." It was mutually assured destruction. Let us walk away, or we blow up the holy sites, and it worked. Saladin was a pious man. He did not want to go down in history as the king of ashes. He agreed to a peaceful surrender. But this is the Middle Ages. Peaceful means you have to pay. The ransom terms were set: 10 dinars for a man, 5 for a woman, 1 for a child. If you paid the ransom, you could walk free to the coast. 10 dinars was a significant amount for a common peasant, but it was basically pocket change for a noble or a wealthy merchant. This is where we see the contrast that really highlights Saladin's character. Look at the patriarch Heraclius. He was the highest-ranking Christian religious leader in the city. As the deadline to pay the ransom approached, thousands and thousands of poor Christians could not pay. They were being rounded up by Saladin's soldiers to be sold into slavery, and Heraclius paid his own 10-dinar ransom. But as he walked out of the city gate, he was followed by wagons and carts, groaning under the weight of gold chalices, priceless carpets, church silver, and all of his personal treasures. He had a literal fortune with him. He could have used that money to pay the ransom for thousands of his own flock, but he did not. He kept the money for himself and let the poor go into slavery. It is infuriating. Saladin's men saw this. His emirs and generals were begging him, saying, "My lord, do not let him take that. That is the city's wealth. Seize it and use it to free the people." It seems like the obvious and just move, but Saladin refused. He said, "I have signed a treaty with him. A promise is a promise." He let the greedy patriarch walk away, safe and rich, because his word meant more to him than all that gold. That kind of personal integrity is rare in any century. But then, look at what Saladin did next. Since so many of the poor could not pay, Saladin's own brother Aladil stepped in. He saw the misery in the streets. He went to Saladin and said, "Brother, I have served you well. Give me a gift for my service." Saladin asked, "What do you want?" Aladil said, "Give me 1,000 slaves." Saladin agreed to give him 1,000 people. Aladil immediately turned around and set every single one of them free. It was a very clever way to bypass the accountants and the rules of the treaty. Then Saladin himself started freeing people. He saw the elderly who could not pay and could not work, and he let them go for free. He freed the widows and orphans of the knights who had died at Hattin. He essentially used his own authority and his family's generosity to liberate a huge portion of the population without technically breaking the ransom rules. So Jerusalem is back in Muslim hands. The call to prayer rings out from Al-Aqsa for the first time in 88 years, and there is no massacre. Europe goes into absolute shock. The Pope reportedly died of grief when he heard the news, which of course brings the Titans to the field. Section 5. The Third Crusade. Europe sends its A-team. The King of France, Philip Augustus. The Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, who famously drowns in a river on the way, but that is a whole other story. And of course, Richard I of England. Richard the Lionheart. Saladin versus Richard. It is the heavyweight title fight of the Middle Ages. What is so fascinating is that they developed this strange, distant, chivalrous respect for each other. They never actually met face to face. Not once. Never. They only ever communicated through messengers and gifts. But the stories of their interactions are legendary. Like the story about the fruit. When Richard fell seriously ill with a fever, probably scurvy during the long siege of Acre, he was craving fresh food. Saladin heard about it and sent him baskets of fresh peaches and pears. He even sent him fresh snow from the mountains to cool the king's fever. He is sending room service to the guy who is actively trying to kill him and take his city. Then there is the story from the Battle of Jaffa. Richard's horse was killed from under him. He was on the beach fighting on foot, swinging a giant Danish axe. Saladin was watching from a nearby hill. He turned to his brother and supposedly said, "It is not right that such a great king should have to fight on foot." He sent a groom down through the middle of the battle with 2 magnificent Arabian horses as a gift for Richard, so they could have a fair fight. It sounds like something out of a romance novel, but we have to be very careful not to get lost in the romance, because this war was incredibly brutal. We have to talk about the massacre at Acre, because Richard was not always the chivalrous gentleman. After Richard finally captured the vital port city of Acre, there was a dispute over the terms of surrender, specifically about prisoner swaps. Richard felt that Saladin was stalling. He got impatient. So he marched roughly 3,000 Muslim prisoners, men, women, and children from the city's garrison, out onto a plain in front of the city walls, in plain view of Saladin's army and his pickets, and he had them all beheaded. 3,000 people slaughtered in an afternoon as a message. That is just horrific. The Muslim sources say it broke Saladin's heart, but it also hardened him. After that, he ordered that Crusader prisoners be executed in retaliation. So yes, they exchanged courteous gifts of fruit and horses, but they also waded through rivers of blood. The war eventually just ground to a stalemate. Richard was a brilliant tactician. He won the major field battles, like at Arsuf, but he could never take Jerusalem. Saladin had implemented a scorched earth policy. He had the wells around the city poisoned or filled in, and Richard knew that if he marched his army on Jerusalem, they would die of thirst and starvation before they ever breached the walls. And Richard had his own problems back home in England. Big problems. His brother Prince John was trying to steal his throne. So Richard knew he had to leave. And Saladin, for his part, was exhausted. His coalition was tired. He had been riding and fighting almost non-stop for decades. So in 1192, they finally signed the Treaty of Ramla, the Great Compromise. Jerusalem would stay under Muslim control. The Crusaders would keep a thin strip of land along the coast. And importantly, unarmed Christian pilgrims would be allowed to visit the holy sites in Jerusalem peacefully. Before we move on from the crusade, I have to ask you about the marriage proposal. It is the most bizarre, almost unbelievable moment of medieval diplomacy. At one point in the negotiations, Richard actually proposed that his own sister Joan of England should marry Saladin's brother Al-Adil, a Christian princess marrying a Muslim prince, in the middle of a crusade. The plan was that the two of them, the Christian princess and the Muslim prince, would live in Jerusalem and rule it together as a joint peaceful kingdom. That would have completely changed the course of world history. And Saladin actually agreed to discuss it. He was open to the idea, but Joan, she apparently went ballistic. She flatly refused to marry a Muslim, and of course the Pope would never have signed off on it. But the fact that it was even on the table shows you how much the rigid lines of holy war had blurred between these two men. So the war ends. Richard sails away. And we get to section 6, the man behind the myth. What was he really like when the armor came off? For a man who conquered empires and controlled vast wealth, he was shockingly bad with money. He gave it all away. He was generous to a fault. His treasurers used to keep a secret stash of money hidden from him, because they knew if Saladin saw gold in the treasury, he would immediately give it away to the first widow, or orphan or soldier, who came to him with a problem. There is that incredible story about the baby, the Christian mother. This was during the siege of Acre. Some thieves from the Muslim camp snuck into the Christian camp, stole a baby from its mother's tent, and sold it in the slave market. The mother was absolutely hysterical. Her commanders, the Crusader kings, told her go to Saladin. He is a merciful man. Imagine that. Your own generals tell you go ask the enemy general for help. She went to his tent, fell at his feet, weeping in the dirt. The sources say Saladin was moved to tears by her grief. He stopped everything he was doing. He sent his men to the slave market, bought the baby back with his own personal money, and returned it to her. Then he had her escorted safely back to the enemy lines. It is stories like that which make the legend stick for 800 years. But we also have to remember the propaganda machine. Saladin had official biographers, men like Ahmad ad-Din and Baha ad-Din, who were writing his history while he was still alive. They were carefully curating his public image. They were polishing the image, making sure he was always presented as the ideal mujahid, the perfect warrior of God. And he had his critics too. The historian Ibn al-Athir, who we mentioned earlier, pointed out Saladin's strategic mistakes. He argued that Saladin was far too soft on the Crusader-held city of Tyre. After Hattin, he let the garrison at Tyre surrender and just stay there. They did not occupy it. And Tyre became the primary landing point, the bridgehead, for the entire Third Crusade. If Saladin had taken Tyre when he had the chance, Richard the Lionheart and the French king would have had nowhere to land their armies. So some argue his mercy at Tyre actually cost the Muslim world another 3 years of bloody war and thousands of lives. It is a heavy debate. Was it a moment of moral strength or a massive strategic error? Eventually, time runs out for everyone. Which brings us to Section 7, Death and Legacy. It is 1193. The war is over. Richard is gone. Saladin is back in his beloved Damascus. He is not an old man. He is only 55 or 56, but his body is wrecked. Decades of riding, of sleeping in armor, of battlefield wounds, and the constant stress of holding this massive fractious coalition together. He catches a fever. It was likely typhoid. And it happens quickly. Very quickly. Within a couple of weeks, he slips into a coma. And on March 4th, 1193, he dies. And we are right back where we started, in Damascus with that empty treasury. The most powerful man from the Nile to the Euphrates, the conqueror of Jerusalem, left nothing for his heirs. No dynasty of wealth, just a name and a legacy. What happened to the Ayyubid empire he built? It fractured almost immediately. His sons started fighting his brother Al-Adil for control, yet the unity he had forged was based almost entirely on his personal charisma and his reputation for justice. Once he was gone, the empire fell back into civil war. But the symbol of Saladin remained. The symbol became more powerful than ever, the Eagle of Saladin. In the 1950s, with the rise of pan-Arab nationalism, leaders like Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt were looking for a historical hero, a symbol that represented Arab unity and resistance against the West. Saladin fit that bill perfectly. He was the great unifier. He was the one who kicked the Western powers out of Jerusalem. So they adopted his eagle as their own. If you look today at the coat of arms of Egypt, of Iraq, of Palestine, of Yemen, you see that golden eagle. It is a direct callback to him. It is so ironic. A Kurdish mercenary from Tikrit becomes the ultimate symbol of Arab nationalism. And in the West, he became something else. He became a mirror. Dante Alighieri, in his famous poem, The Divine Comedy, puts Saladin in limbo. That is a good thing. For a medieval Catholic, it is the highest honor he could give a non-Christian. He did not put him in hell with the other infidels. He put him in the first circle, with the virtuous pagans, with Hector of Troy, with Julius Caesar, with Plato and Aristotle. He was seen as one of the great men of history, regardless of faith. The West used Saladin's example to shame their own kings. They held him up and said, "Look at him. He is more honest, more merciful, and more chivalrous than our own Christian knights." So bringing this all together, what is the final takeaway here? We have looked at the coup, the battles, the mercy, the ruthlessness, and the poverty. I think the lesson of Saladin is that in the long run, legitimacy and justice matter more than brute force. He could conquer cities with his army, yes, but he held his empire together because people, even his enemies, came to believe that he was a just man. He did not sack Jerusalem. He kept his word. He did not hoard the gold. He showed that you could fight a holy war without completely losing your humanity. And that is why, more than 800 years later, we are still talking about the Sultan who died penniless, the Lion of the Desert, a complicated, brilliant, and fascinating man. If you love this look into the real life of Saladin, and you want to understand the complex people behind the dates and the battles, make sure you hit that subscribe button for History Titans. We have so many more stories like this one lined up. And here is a question for you to chew on. Let us know down in the comments. Do you think Saladin's mercy at the city of Tyre was a sign of his moral strength? Or was it a massive strategic blunder that cost thousands of lives in the long run? It is the ultimate question, isn't it? Being a good man versus being a ruthless general. Let us know what you think. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will see you next time.